Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on creating gender-inclusive vocational education and training and economies for all. My name is Jelena Manić-Radojičić. I'm a Deputy Team Leader of the Regional Challenge Fund, and I'm delighted to be your moderator and co-host together with my colleagues from the Fund Management Unit of the Regional Challenge Fund, Vesa, Renato, Sven, Biljana, and Masha. It's an honor to moderate and host this discussion that will try to delve into the heart of achieving gender parity within vocational education and training and the broader economy. Before we start with the program, I would like to give the word to our technical support to briefly share some useful tips for best possible online experience today.
Thank you, Jelena. Dear attendees, to have a smooth webinar experience, please follow this guide. To turn on the interpretation, click the globe icon in the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen and choose your preferred language. To ask questions, please use the chat option in the Zoom toolbar. To reach the technical support, if you are experiencing technical issues, please use the chat option as well. Thank you for your attention. Enjoy the webinar.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Thank you, technical support. We sure believe that today's webinar is going to be enjoyable, experienced technically and content-wise. And thanks to all of you for spending your Friday morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you're dialing in from, with the Regional Challenge Fund. Regional Challenge Fund, as you know, is financing partnerships between enterprises and vocational education and training providers to address skills in joint cooperation and to contribute to sustainable competitiveness of businesses on their way to the EU single market. And as a multi-donor funding facility, RCF invests in equipment and infrastructure for cooperative, vocational, work-based learning or dual projects designed in partnerships between consortia. You all know that our program is funded by German cooperation, German Federal Ministry for Economic Development and Cooperation, German Development Bank, Swiss Development Corporation, and implemented by Western Balkans Six-Chamber Investment Forum. And our team today represents Fund Management Unit. Besides investments and more than 70 million euros that goes into changing that landscape of Western Balkans to contribute to business competitiveness, we also stand for excellence in vocational education and training to make all occupations inclusive and attractive to all genders and groups. Promoting gender inclusivity in vocational education, it's not just a matter of equity. It's a powerful driver of workforce enrichment, economic growth, and innovation. As we navigate the rapidly evolving labor market driven by technological advancements, digitization, and the push towards sustainable development, which we discussed in details 1 month ago in an earlier webinar, we also need to make sure that all genders have equal opportunities in education, training, and employment. This becomes more important than ever. Today, we will explore the barriers that both women and men face, from cultural and institutional challenges to labor market biases, and we will also discuss strategies for overcoming these obstacles. We are privileged to have with us at this webinar distinguished speakers. Sarah Elson-Rogers, she's a senior international expert on TVET and team leader for the EU's education outreach in the USA and Canada, and she will provide her expert analysis and perspectives on gender parity for fostering inclusivity. Professor Dragan Stanojević is Assistant Professor of Sociology at the Faculty of Philosophy, University of Belgrade, and he will offer a sociological lens on the barriers to gender equality in education and training, focusing on agriculture and welding. Ms. Ivana Živadinović. Ivana comes from RCF, Regional Project Coordinator, and together with Dragan, they authored interesting handbooks, and she will also share her insights on significant challenge that region is facing in enhancing gender inclusivity in VET from a perspective of another regional project. Thank you all for joining us in this important conversation. And thanks also goes to our participants. As I mentioned, you're spending your Friday with us. You come from education, business development projects, enterprises, and you have your own reality, of course. And yeah, let me just acknowledge that we wanted to learn more about you and your background. I see already 116 participants join, so thanks for your trust. And we wanted to learn more about you and how you cope with challenges related to promoting gender equality. So here is what we discovered, that 80% of you are involved in gender inclusive initiatives and campaigns that promote gender equality in occupations or training programs that you run. Then there's a high percentage of you that's trying to integrate gender equality principles into the curriculum and teaching practices. And also significant efforts are reported in ensuring that workplace facilities are accessible and appropriate for all genders, fostering digitalization, using gender neutral language, and having anti-harassment and anti-discrimination policies were also reported as present. So this gives us a bit of a flavor what's going out in the region and what has been recognized so far in coping with gender equality. As we proceed, we encourage you to engage, ask questions, and reflect on the lessons shared today and think how can you apply them in your context. We would love to hear from you. Please use our chat function. Yeah, at the end, you will have time to hear your answers from our dear panelists and speakers. So let's get started. I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker, Sarah Elson-Rogers. For close to 30 years, Sarah has worked with VET policymakers, practitioners, and researchers across the world. She has worked with ministries of education, employment, and vocational training providers, social partner organizations, and researchers. Sarah spent 13 years at the European Union's Center for the Development of Vocational Education and Training, known as 𝗧cie𝗃𝗶𝗰𝗀. And more recently, she also worked with UN's Agency for VET, UNIVOC. She specialized in policymaking, research, technical assistance, capacity building, but also how to make VET more attractive and accessible for women. So we are so excited to have Sarah with us here today. I'd like to invite her to share her insights on global trends in gender inclusivity in TVET and practices we can learn from. Sarah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jelena. And of course, the first test is whether I'm capable of sharing a PowerPoint on a Zoom screen. Let's go. Okay. Let's put it on presentation mode. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to also back up Jelena's welcome in terms of spending your Friday afternoon with us. As Jelena has described, I have worked in many countries and have been lucky enough to have spent some time in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro and North Macedonia. So I do know a little about your VET systems, but yes, little. Before describing what I will talk about today, I do want to underline one really important fact. And that is, we're here to advocate for the importance of creating education and training systems in which all young people can find their career and life path, both girls, boys, all genders alike. We want all young people to thrive. This is not a zero-sum game. Where there are any discrepancies between education participation rates, we want to examine why they exist and what we need to do to close them. So having said that, I know everyone here today will have observed the prevalence and endurance of educational and occupational segregation according to sex and gender. Walk into any VET provider in the world, the cosmetology and nursing courses will be dominated by men. The welding, mechatronics and automotive courses will be filled with men. Sorry, I meant the cosmetology courses will be filled with women, of course. There are some enduring, and I would also say new stereotypes for girls and boys, which have little rational basis. And automation and digitalisation has already changed the physical demands of many occupations. And it's questionable whether the pigeonholing boys and girls into certain types of training courses, occupations and careers ever really had a rational basis beyond social engineering according to gender. I would also like to take this argument a bit further. I would like us to question what economic gains have we lost and are we continuing to lose due to occupational gender segregation. I would argue that many sectors in the economy would be in a better shape had they not been dominated by a particular gender. I also want to add that young people themselves are questioning gender definitions and redefining how they define themselves. Now over to you. Whilst the vet system can't do everything to break down these barriers, vet schools and providers do sit at a crucial nexus between the secondary and tertiary education systems and between the education system and the labour market. You are the ones with multiple connections with schools, labour market partners, local communities, local business, and you are the key movers and shakers for women's and men's accessibility to new and changing occupations. So to move on to what I'm going to speak to today, I'm going to cover three main topic areas. The first is to cover the UN's Global Development Goals as they relate to VET and to progress made in women's participation in education, training and the labour market. Now, I'm going to draw primarily on the data presented in the annual Global Gender Gap Report. This is produced each year by the World Economic Forum. It's a really well put together report and it gets better each year. And if you're interested in seeing the data for your own individual country from any of the data I present today, there will be a handout circulated after this webinar, so you can look in more detail at the data for your own countries. I do want to give one exception to this data. There is one country that's not represented in much of the data, and that's Kosovo. What data there is, I have included a link to it in the handout, but please be aware that Kosovo data tends to be absent from much of the international data. I would anyway argue that the themes are universal. There are some trends in the data globally which apply to every single country. So following the data section, I will present a model of potential reasons of why women participate less in VET. And I will also present some of my own observations gathered over the years and the consequences this has, the real world consequences this has for both women as a group and the functioning of the labour market. While presenting these 2 points, I will be asking for your input. We will run some short polls, asking you if the data and the research reflects your own experience and your own observations of why women choose or don't choose a VET pathway. And then lastly, in the third part of my presentation, you'll be pleased to hear that I will be quiet. I'm hoping, if technology and bandwidth allows, that you will get to see a short video of a case study on how VET providers are trying to meet the new skills demand in the automotive sector. I'll say a few more words about this when we get to that section, but I think it's a really interesting case study. And then, of course, in the last part of the webinar, hopefully we'll have some time for questions and you can share your own experiences. All right, so quite a lot of ground to cover. So I'm sure many of you already know the UN Sustainable Development Targets for Women in Education and Training fall under Goal 4, Quality Education. And there are 3 targets which are relevant here. Target 4.3, by 2030, to ensure equal access for all women and men to affordable and quality technical, vocational and tertiary education, including university. Target 4.4, again, same year, by 2030, to substantially increase the number of youth and adults who have relevant skills, including technical and vocational skills for employment, decent jobs and entrepreneurship. And target 4.5 by 2030 to eliminate gender disparities in education and ensure equal access for everybody. The issue of gender is also covered in other goals, but relevant today. Goal 5 is gender equality and goal 8 is decent work. And again, each of those has a target. Target 5.5 under gender equality, again, 2030, ensure women's full and effective participation and equal opportunities for leadership at all levels of decision making in political and economic life. And then goal 8 has a target to achieve full and productive employment and decent work for all women and men and equal pay for work of equal value. So those are the goals. What does the data show for the countries included in the Regional Challenge Fund? So it won't surprise you that there is better progress in some targets than in others. And as I said, the World Economic Forum gathers all available national data, which is internationally standardized and which relate to gender. They basically aggregate these data into 4 dimensions, which attempt to measure women's participation in society. And those dimensions, you can see them listed on the slide, are education, economy, health, and politics. So a country that has gender parity in each of these dimensions would score a 1. So you can see on the slide, I presented the results for Albania for 2024. You can see Albania scores close to 1 in education, in other words, pretty much close to parity, but less than 0.5 in politics and less than 0.8 in its economy. And what that translates to, roughly speaking, is that women have half the chance to participate in political life and in political representation as men. I do want to underscore that this is about gender parity. It says nothing about the quality of opportunities for men and women in a society, only whether they are on a par, equal. Again, just to remind you, Jelena will send this out after the webinar so you can see your own countries at your leisure over the weekend, if you have nothing else. I will say something though about the scores for each of the countries on the education indicator. And from a gender parity perspective, countries are doing well. North Macedonia is scored at a 1, perfect parity. For every 1 boy participant in education and training, there is 1 girl, although demographic differences are factored into this calculation, and all other countries are very close to 1. But what does this tell us about VET participation? And unfortunately, not very much. The data on VET are not good. There is an international indicator for VET, but VET systems are all so different that the data is just not robust or comparable. I'm not going to present it here, but it is in the handout. You can see your VET indicators. What I would say is that from the inadequate data which is available, women are underrepresented in VET on average to a greater or lesser degree in each country. So moving on, now I need to call out Alexandra, I think. Moving on to our first poll. Before I go on to some of the potential reasons why women participate less in VET than men and boys, I would like you to answer a quick poll to see if this data actually reflects your observations and your reality. And there are 3 questions in this poll. The first is, do you observe that there are fewer girls choosing a VET pathway on average compared to boys in your country? Do you observe that some courses tend to have more female participants and others have more males? And do you believe that the male-female predominance in participation is justified? So please go ahead and answer the question.
Thank you, Mrs. Rogers. I would just like for everybody who are using mobile versions of Zoom, please swipe from right to left to see the poll and to be able to vote. We will leave the poll for 30 more seconds, and then we'll see the results. Thank you. Okay, the vote is now over. We will end the poll and show the results so Mrs. Rogers can comment.
Perfect.
The results are shared. Please,
All
Mrs.
right.
Rogers.
Excellent. Okay, so I can see that broadly speaking, everyone observes that there are fewer girls on average. We had a response of 69% observe that there are fewer girls choosing a VET pathway in their country. 88% observe that courses tend to have more female participants and some courses have more male participants. And in terms of whether you believe that this predominance is justified, 64% answered no, that this predominance is not justified. Okay, great. So I'm going to go on now to present a little bit more some of the reasons in the research. And again, after I've presented some of those reasons, I will ask again for you to tell me whether or not this reflects your reality. Oh, 1 second. Okay. So in terms of research that examines why there is this course segregation, this diagram was part of a piece of work undertaken by Univoc on why women participate less in STEM courses. Now, STEM, I'm sure you all know, the acronym stands for science, technology, engineering and maths, but I think it's actually applicable more generally beyond STEM courses. It basically presents 3 categories of obstacles. So societal, institutional, and personal. And some society level obstacles would include, for example, the cultural norms that girls and boys face, which prevent them from accessing certain courses. They don't go because it's against the social norm. Institutional obstacles include the educational and labour market barriers. These barriers might be a lack of female staff and teachers in a vet school. Labour market barriers can be due to a general absence of women in an occupation, which has become so embedded that no one even questions any longer why there are no women or men in certain occupations. You know the phrase, you can't be what you don't see. And then last, but by no means least, personal level obstacles will include the self-perception of the individual and the expectations put upon them by their family. I know that in Germany, they've had a campaign to try to encourage more young people to enter apprenticeships, which have been on the decline. And they discovered that the people that they need to campaign to are the parents of young people. It turns out that the parents can be quite big obstacles to young people going into a vet pathway. I would say the existence of these obstacles pervade the research, and I know that this is going to be touched upon by other speakers. Women and girls frequently just operate in a different context. This might be due to their role in the family. Girls and women throughout their lives are expected to take on more of the caring roles, which not only defines their experience, it cuts into their time. I would also say education pathways differ. Traditionally, vet schools have been male-dominated spaces. That means that staff, equipment, facilities have been designed around them. Similarly with workplaces, in a range of trades, occupations, sectors have been staffed and designed for a male workforce. Tools, facilities, and even thinking of clothing have had a male in mind for no reason except in many cases tradition. To say something else about the labour market context, women often have less representation in works councils and trades unions and at senior levels in management. The workplace has been organised by and for a male workforce. And lastly, I would say women face other, often less obvious constraints to accessing or to their training and work choices. And I want to say here, for example, the ability to become self-employed or to have the access to financial markets to become an entrepreneur, to access transport, for example, at the time of the day where they feel they can safely travel. Again, there are some really interesting examples of creating women cooperatives in certain trades to try to overcome some of these less visible barriers. Again, to give some specific figures on this, in the majority of countries, women do the care work, usually unpaid and unrewarded. And I found some country data here from Serbia, shows that of the population aged over 18, 68% of women cook each day compared to 12% of men. 41% of women care for someone else compared to 30% of men. I found some examples from North Macedonia about women earning less than men. They have a higher risk of poverty, a shorter working life, higher inactivity rates, which means that they are at higher risk of poverty, higher economic vulnerability, and worse financial prospects at every stage of their life. Women also tend to have less power in the political system, as I raised earlier, and in the labour market. Data for Montenegro shows that they are 2/3 less likely, for example, to be on a company management board. I just want to emphasise that I've drawn examples from your countries, but these tendencies are observed everywhere. I'm not trying to pick out any single country. These are tendencies observed in every country. So on that topic, we have our second poll, Alexandra. This poll has two questions. The first is, do you observe these barriers in your vet school and in your labour markets? And my second question is, how hopeful are you that they can be overcome? Where one is, I'm not at all hopeful, it's awful. Two is, not sure, maybe. And three is, I'm really hopeful. And again, I'll just give you a minute or so to answer those questions.
Again, to repeat, for everybody who's using mobile version of Zoom, please swipe from right to left to see the poll and to be able to vote. Thank you. Okay, we will end the poll now and share the results. Results shared. Mrs. Rogers, you may continue.
Okay, excellent. Well, 80% of respondents do observe these barriers in their vet schools and labour markets. Okay, so that does back up what the research says. And how hopeful are you that they can be overcome? Well, 45% very hopeful, which is great. 47% are not sure. Okay, so let's see what we can do to convince the not sures to be very hopeful. All right, thank you. Okay. So, as I said, I hope to convince you now that these stereotypes are no longer relevant, certainly for many occupations, and we can overcome them. I know that most of the people here today will already have observed over the years changes in occupations and trades. As I said earlier, new machinery, automation, digitalisation has already changed and continues to change what it means to work in industry. I just want to introduce you a little bit to the pictures on the slideshow. On the far right, that is a picture of a hydroponic farm, and in the middle is the picture of an electric car. If this is what the future of farming and automotive look like, we're looking at a very different set of skills than in the past. The third picture is actually of me wearing a virtual reality headset, trying to learn my way around a car and also not to bump into the walls. I would also like to re-emphasise that society is changing its attitudes to gender, including in its public policy, in terms of what is socially acceptable, as well as in families and communities. Are these changes happening at the same speed everywhere? Surely not, but encouraging more women in traditionally male careers and occupations can drive those slow changing attitudes to change more quickly, we hope. Again, I want to repeat it, the vet sector can be a key driver in these changes. I'm sure that each of your countries, for example, has a national action plan for gender equality, and I hope the vet sector is strongly represented in that plan. All right, so a quick move back to the data. So while the situation for education parity looks hopeful, participation for women on the labour market is less positive. Again, this data is drawn from the Global Gender Gap Report, and this is the indicator for labour market and economic opportunities for women. As a reminder, anything below 1 shows a disparity in female equality with males. This indicator is a composite of data. You can see, those of you who really love data can see the list of the sub-indicators on the right-hand side of the slide. But you can see that the figures for all countries are strongly below 1. And I just want to underline here that no country in the world achieves parity in this indicator. So what does this actually look like? Well, it looks like this. Women represent 42% of the global workforce, less than 32% of senior leadership. It looks worse when considering the jobs and skills of the future. The sectors with the highest representation of women in STEM jobs all have less than 25% female representation. These are the best sectors. Just to pinpoint manufacturing, the manufacturing sector has marginally more than 20% female representation in STEM jobs. I found a piece of data for Serbia that showed that women occupied close to 22% of ICT professional roles, information, communication and technology. And of those, just under 22%, they earn on average 9% less than their male counterparts. It's looking a bit better for the representation of women working in artificial intelligence jobs, but again, even in the best sectors, their representation falls well short of 50%, and in manufacturing, it's 31%. And I just want to say a quick word about the fact that change is not happening very quickly. So the World Economic Forum report predicts that at the current rate of change, most countries will have achieved education parity in the next 20 years. So it's pretty hopeful. But for economic participation and opportunity, the timeline is 152 years at the current rate of change, and that rate has been slowing recently. Again, I was able to find specific data for Serbia. I'm not trying to pick out Serbia, it's just that there was good data for Serbia that showed labour market parity would be achieved much quicker actually than the global average in 58 years. Although this was balanced a little bit by not achieving equal access for women to financial resources for another 269 years at the current rate of change. There's something odd in this data that I'm sure some of you will have already picked up. Girls now outrepresent men and boys at tertiary level university education. So this slowing rate of change in the labour market is completely out of step with what is perceived in the higher education system. And this is my last slide with numbers. It shows the available data for tertiary level graduates in your countries where there's data available. You can see that girls graduate university at much higher rates than boys, with over a 10% gap in each case presented here. Something, by the way, which I also think should be examined and addressed. But again, many fewer women are graduating in ICT, STEM and engineering. Compare that to the health sector, where the vast majority of tertiary graduates are female. And clearly, in many systems, this is the vet sector. None of these disparities can be beneficial for any of those sectors. All right, so I'm close to the end. I've presented a model of reasons and barriers behind women being educationally and occupationally segregated. So now we move on to an example of good practice. It's drawn from the United States, which, by the way, I want to emphasize scores lower in the Global Gender Gap Index than many of the countries represented here today. So again, I'm not trying to emphasize the US as a whole as being a good case. But I've chosen this case study because it brings together really succinctly how labour market demand is driving skills needs changes in the automotive sector, and is basically creating an opportunity for women and for the sector itself. So the automotive sector, it's based in the state of Utah, is predicting to need 300,000 new skilled workers in the coming years, with a wide range of qualifications spanning those necessary to being a mechanic, as well as for higher skilled engineering and technical jobs. So the sector is having to look beyond its traditional male recruits. They're working with their vet schools, colleges and universities to encourage more women into the sector. A quick aside before you see the video. In the US education and training system, you often find really close links between post-secondary education and training with colleges which award degree level qualifications. You have universities awarding upper and post-secondary level qualifications. There's a lot of permeability across the institutional structure of the system. In addition, all education and training providers are expected to build really close relationships with their local enterprises and employers, including chambers of business and commerce. In fact, their existence depends on those links. All right, so the case study shows how the education and training system is addressing multiple barriers to women entering automotive careers, from their own attitudes to themselves, to their family, to general culture within the vet school and the labour market. The case shows how multiple barriers are being questioned and, most importantly for today, how they're being addressed. You will hear in the case study how girls are being made to feel that they belong, but also how educators are working a bit differently to reach girls at an earlier age. In other words, there's a concerted effort being done across education, vet, and the labour market stakeholders to reach out to girls to enter this traditional male occupation. Please do look out for the comment of the teacher who points to what our economies and technologies miss when they fail to balance gender. So enjoy the video, enjoy the next presentation. Happy to take any questions, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sarah, for this wonderful presentation. And now we ask technical support to play the video. In the meantime, there was one question, Sarah, does ICT sector includes also digital accounting industry?
It's a good question. There are some very, it's harder sometimes now to distinguish across these occupations. So I would say it's highly dependent on how accountancy is regulated in your country.
Great. Thanks for your quick response to this question. And I believe we should see the video now.
Yes, this is technical support speaking. We are launching the video, but as it seems, we're having some issues sharing the sound. But let me just give a few seconds so I can try and solve it. Thank you.
Perfect. While you're doing that, can I just address another point in the chat? Yes, I'm aware of the European indicator for the global, the European indicator for gender equality. And again, where there is data available for your countries, you're absolutely correct. There's data for Albania, data for Serbia. I've put links into the handout.
Great, thanks for your sharp eye and taking a note of that comment in chat as well from Milana. Thanks. Well, let's see if video is ready. We can see it, and if otherwise we can play it later on after presentations.
Okay, let me try and play the video. Are you ready?
Yes, please.
Be more technical than mechanical.
Can you hear it?
Yes, thank you. No, actually, it's not really working, Alexandra. We can send a link later. Too bad, but yeah, that's how technology goes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. So as I said, we'll send video, we'll send a link. So please take a look, and it's really a great example. So thank you, Sarah. You mentioned key themes such as UN Sustainable Development Goals, focusing on gender equality, employment, so global trends, global strategy frameworks, but also how it works for real people and barriers they face in education, families, and leveraging labor market demands. And yeah, I understand that video we try to show, it depicts how educational reforms and collaboration with industry can drive change, and how addressing gender disparity is essential for economic growth and innovation. And moving on to our next speakers, they worked a lot with vocational education training providers, because we know that education shapes attitudes, skills, and opportunities that influence future workforce participation. Yeah, Ivana and Dragan, they work together on a project from 𝗧cie, Education Reform Initiative from Southeast Europe. Ivana has more than 50 years of experience in education research, and she will briefly outline 𝗧cie's activities and why did they find important to work on research and publication on social dimension of education that also focus on supporting gender equity in VET. Ivana, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Elena. Greetings from Lora, actually, this time, a lovely Albanian coastal city that finally has some sun, I have to share. My name is Ivana Živadinović. I work at the Education Reform Initiative of Southeastern Europe. And first and foremost, a huge thank you to the Regional Challenge Fund, and especially Elena, for organizing these important events. And of course, also inviting us to present the good work we have been doing, not just by us, but also our partners, vocational education and training agencies, qualification agencies, chambers of commerce, and quality assurance agencies from the Western Balkans 6. And now I'm gonna try to show off my competences in sharing, but might fail. Let's see. Okay, this is good. I'm seeing just Sarah, so maybe, okay, great. Thank you.
Everything's good.
Lovely. I have just a few minutes to remind you all that Education Reform Initiative of Southeastern Europe is established by ministers of education from 7 economies here, and we work mainly at enhancing regional cooperation in education and training. And we work primarily, and my slides are not changing, okay, in two main areas, pre-tertiary education and tertiary education. As you can see from this chart, we are focusing on activities that can be tackled at regional level. That's first and foremost the quality assurance, vocational education and training enhancement, teacher education and training, and at the tertiary level, the most inspiring and challenging bit, recognition of higher education qualifications. And a project, quite a big project that we are very proud of, enhancements in quality of education and training in Southeastern Europe, funded by the Austrian Development Agency, covering Western Balkans 6 and Moldova, focuses on both vocational education and training and quality assurance side of pre-tertiary education. And I do not have time to present the project here, and I will not do so. However, this is the list of the outputs we have, well, mostly developed so far. Again, they cover vocational education training and quality assurance. And what is important for us, and has been from the get-go, was to ensure that the concept of social dimension, and social dimension for us means ensuring the support for each and every learner in the process of education throughout the education system and all the steps of education is being addressed. And we have ensured that we have this opportunity, and we utilize this opportunity to have this top-down approach, to include gender equity principles into all the outputs we have developed. That includes occupational standards, qualification standards, national curricula, and standards of competences for external evaluators. So, and then after ensuring that we have experts, Dragan, Professor Stanojević is one of those experts who have revised all of our outputs, made comments, and ensured that contemporary principles of social dimension of education are embedded in those outputs. We have also worked directly with trainers of teachers, company instructors, and external evaluators, ensuring that they fully understand and can apply those principles in their everyday work. And Ivana gave me 5 minutes, so I'm very, very rushing. One of the ways in which we try doing so is ensuring that developing teaching and learning material that briefly explains the basic principles of social dimension, social sustainability and gender equity primarily. And one of the publications is what Ivana already mentioned, is a publication written by Professor Stanojević and myself, Understanding Social Inequalities. And this is something that I think we lack in the region a bit, given we wanted to provide a theoretical background behind social dimension of education. And every time I say social dimension of education, I mean gender equity as well. To show that there are reasons behind the measures, that there is a theoretical background of the proposed measures, but at the same time to provide very direct and precise activities that can be implemented by all stakeholders in education in their everyday work. And Dragan will talk more about these publications. I have just, as you will receive these presentations, you have links here for all 3 presentations. And they're designed available in Serbian, but translated to Albanian and Macedonian. And what is for me important here to say that they're very much applicable, not just to those specific occupations that we have worked with, in our case, agricultural technician and locksmith, but can be rather applied to a wider number of schools or study programs that we have in our economies. One also important thing from my side is to say that we are not saying that we have teachers as drivers of change, education in our economies. And this is not to put more on them, to say this is more you have to do. This is more just to say, if you are facing a challenge, this is how you can possibly address it. So it's rather a supportive tool and less a mandatory instruction, so to say. And for us, moving forward, what's important is that we are now facing what is being called green transition, and even more so green just transition. And it means moving towards renewable energies, and those changes are expected to have job losses that are also expected to have to affect females more so than males, and also new emerging jobs and skills and qualifications in which we have to ensure the equitable access for all. And this is where we are expected to think about social dimension of education in the future, and how to ensure that all those changes do not affect, well, not to affect anyone poorly, but also to be just an equitable transition. And the last note from me is that Jelena asked me to provide examples of good practice. And unfortunately, I am not able to do so. These measures that we have implemented and activities that we have implemented are something that we expect to have impact mid and short term. We have worked with trainers of teachers, we have organized trainings, and we have been in constant touch with our, again, partners, vocational vet agencies, qualification agencies, and we're sure that all of these measures will have positive effect, but unfortunately it can be only measured mid and short term. So I do not have any direct example of good practice, but I'm sure that Dragan might have done something to, so I'm giving hot potato to Dragan and saying thank you.
From one sociologist, hot potato goes to another.
Well, I spoke first, so.
Yeah. Okay, you use your advantage. Thanks so much for being on time, and sorry for this 5 minutes, but you know we need to fit in. And also thanks for noting that, yeah, it's hard to find good practice examples, and yeah, we can invite our participants today to share if they know some practices and they have experienced in their own organization on projects they're working. Please share in chat. And yeah, thanks for sharing how 𝗖𝗍 tried to incorporate this important dimension. We at RCF, we also make sure that all received proposals for funding are evaluated for their level of contribution to the specific ambition criteria. Among others, it's a contribution to inclusion of girls and women into funded cooperative and dual vet programs in the Western Balkans 6. So let's make small but important steps toward greater gender parity in both education and labor market. Now let us hear Dragan. Professor Dragan Stanojević is a STEAM sociologist with extensive experience in youth, family, and social inequalities, making him exceptionally well suited to guide us through today's discussion. He started his academic career with a PhD thesis in modern fatherhood, and continued for more than 15 years to conduct extensive social research, not just in Serbia, but also in Southeast Europe and Western Europe in general. Dragan is also national coordinator for the European Social Survey, a senior researcher with the pool of European youth researchers and the European Platform for Learning Mobility. I hope I did not forget anything important from his rich CV. So Dragan, please let us hear more about the exploration on the current data and sociological context related to women's and men's participation in vocational education and employment in the Western Balkans. Please go ahead.
Well, thank you for a kind introduction. Just one additional information. I was a national coordinator for European Social Survey. I stepped out of that role, so I'm not anymore, but it was a nice experience. And today I will try briefly to give you some insight in the project results Ivana already mentioned, where we try to tackle the issue of gender inequalities within secondary vocational educational training system, education and training system. And we, as Ivana said, used or created two outputs. One is more general about theoretical framework, how to understand and how to, in general, tackle these issues, not only gender stereotypes and inequalities in that education, but also social inequalities. And we also created two specific guidelines for agricultural technician and for welder. So you already introduced me, so I don't have to do that by myself. But the aim of this presentation is to gender inequalities from sociological lenses. I'm sociologist. I'm not so much into educational field, so I try to tackle this issue from sociological perspective and to see what are the issues in education, but also outside of education, and how society in general impact gender inequalities in classroom. And there are two questions I would like to answer on. I will try to give some answer. How do we recognize gender inequalities and discrimination? And how do we deal with them in the classroom and male-dominated environment? And male-dominated environment is, as we will see, vocational educational training, educational system where much more boys are present compared to girls. And for the beginning, we can start with two very general questions about capabilities, or maybe some natural differences between men and women. So you can choose from here, and we will see what you think about natural differences between men and women.
Thank you, Mr. Stanojević. So the first question is, boys are naturally more capable of analytical thinking. And we have strongly agree, disagree to strongly agree the rating scale, so you can choose. And girls are naturally better at communication. Again, rating scale 1, 2, 3, 4, from strongly disagree to strongly agree. We have 15 more seconds for the poll.
Polls are anonymous, so feel free to share.
Okay, we're good to end the poll and share the results. The results are shared. Mr. Stanojević, please continue.
Okay, let's keep this in mind, and maybe we can come back to these results later. But what we see, I will present just some facts about education system and about some general observation at systemic level. First impression is already presented by Sarah. We face gender parity challenges in education in many countries. So but in many countries, especially in economically developed countries, these challenges are less present and less pronounced compared maybe to less economically developed country. But what we also can see that in some areas of education, boys are in greater trouble than girls. For example, they show us, PISA tests show us, they have lower scores in almost all aspects of learning. In many countries, they are more likely to drop out at every level of education. have higher chance of entering vocational education and training system, as we can see in this chart. We can see in next chart here, for example, that in Albania, their boys have 4 times likely chances to be in the VET system compared to girls. In Bosnia, Kosovo, they have 2 times likely chances that they are part of that system. EU average is similar to, and OECD average is similar to Western Balkan average, which is a bit higher. But as you can see, boys are much more present in vocational education system. And this is let's say, male dominated environment, especially which we want to tackle with this, with our guidelines and our outputs of the project. And here, when it comes to fields of interest, you can look at the Eurostudent data on tertiary education in European countries. You can see that when it comes to fields of interest, it is evident that traditional perception of male and female jobs and interests still persist. As you can see, boys continue to dominate in ICTs and engineering, while girls are prevalent in education, health, and let's say other caring services. And this is something that we could and we should keep in mind while looking at what we try to achieve with this project. And one more thing I would like to stress at the beginning is that I'm not very happy about the trend or threat of reducing or diminishing the importance of social sciences subjects and courses in curriculum in VET in our countries. And because education is not just to prepare young people, individuals for the labor market, but also to develop skills and attitudes and to make them responsible and critical citizens, including awareness of gender issues. And considering gender inequalities in schools and classroom, we ask the questions what we can do and what we should do, and what teachers, professionals, instructors can do within the schools to recognize and to tackle the issue of gender inequalities. And our outputs are a sort of guidelines for them how to deal with this. And in general, there is a common gender-based assumption that often portray men, for example, as organized, ambitious, more analytical thinking, stronger. On the other hand, women are seen as communicative, emotional, creative, more than men. But these traits are not tied to one's gender. They are often, or they are a result of socialization rather than biological differences. And in the field of education, these stereotypes can pose significant challenge or threat because they shape the expectation of teachers, parents, peers, and can limit students' interest and choices. For example, students might shy away from subject that they love because it doesn't align with societal expectation for their gender. For example, girls would like to be mechanics, but they think that it is not appropriate for a girl to be mechanic, or maybe boy would like to be hairdresser, but it's he stepped away from his ambition because it's not appropriate for him to work as a hairdresser. And as Ivana said, we developed 2 guidelines for teachers and other professionals in the school, how they can tackle this issue within school and during classes. And we provide them with some practical examples, what to do, how to break up gender stereotypes and to improve gender equality, but also to encourage the perception of these jobs and professions to be more gender neutral in the public. We started, for example, in the first one by saying why it's important to link agriculture and gender. And we saw that there are not only differences in the school environment, not only in the educational system, but in the labor market as well. And for example, when you link agriculture and gender, you can see that, for example, World Bank data which promote gender equality in agriculture see that this could that there are some differences, there are some inequalities, and that promoting gender equality could enhance production and reduces risks. The first thing is what we know from data, that access to resources is not gender neutral. There are some inequalities in many regions, including Balkans. Men primarily own land and properties, and the ownership pattern limit women's power and influence despite their significant capabilities and contribution to agriculture. But also, when it comes to market participation, women represent nearly half of the agricultural workers, but they often have limited access to credit and subsidies and other possibilities delivered by state or banks, for example. But it's also, there are some differences or inequalities in risks, because women face higher agricultural risks because due to outdoor work and limited safety measures. They are more exposed to environmental hazards and often lack proper equipment or training to protect themselves. So what teachers and other professionals can do, and what is the first step? The first step is breaking gender stereotypes. Probably the most important and the most effective way how to break gender stereotypes is learning through positive role models in the school. And in that way, school could or should have both male and female teachers and instructors demonstrating a variety of tasks, showing that men and women can perform any job equally well. For example, the presence of both male and female teachers performing diverse tasks, as, for example, female teacher driving a tractor, or male teacher milking a cow, or female instructor welding, or using some powerful tool machine, challenges conventional expectations, and can send a powerful stereotype breaking message to young people, to students, because it illustrates that skills are not gender specific. And to support this, it is important for schools to adopt balanced gender hiring policies for teaching and support staff, providing students with diverse role models in this way. Next, it is important to use, or it could be helpful to use gender neutral language to avoid gender stereotypes, especially related to traditionally perceived gender roles. For example, instead of saying, can student or boy or girl take this, they could say, can someone from the class take this, especially if this task is usually connected with some gender roles, for example, to clean this up or to move this table away or something like that. This subtle shift in language ensures that we are not, or teachers are not, that they are not unintentionally excluding anyone based on gender. And they should also try to avoid emphasizing gender even for, as I said, physically demanding tasks, recognizing that all students, regardless of gender, have unique strengths and capabilities. And unfortunately, today, development of technology gave us opportunity to include all or almost all students in all activities, because physical strength is not anymore so important as it was in the past. Of course, not only to gender neutral language, and it's not only about language, it's also about practices within classroom. It's important to balance classroom roles equitably. Teachers could review gender-based roles and assess whether tasks traditionally assigned to boys or girls are now truly justified. For example, roles like maintaining discipline during teacher absence from the classroom or managing classroom tasks could be rotated equally between boys and girls. Traditionally, this could be assigned for boys or for girls, for example. But also, they could or should encourage inclusive involvement of all students, engaging boys in tasks that typically associated with girls, such as, for example, decorating for school events, but also encouraging girls to participate in activities traditionally seen as masculine. And one more thing is really important, and it's related to representation in official school bodies, for example. They can suggest proportional representation of boys and girls for position for example, student council or other leadership roles, because applying this principle to group activities ensures that both genders have equal influence and participation, enriching their experience and skills as well. But also, teachers can give them many interesting historical examples of changing gender roles, maybe even some funny examples. For example, when you look at the history, and let's say modern history of Europe, historically, the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century Europe shifted labor from shared farm work to factory jobs. And this actually increased gender inequalities by moving men into public spheres while confining women to private domestic roles. And this separation initially reinforced gender disparities, but also laid the groundwork for later gender rights movement, feminist movements. And progress toward equality in the late 19th and 20th centuries saw significant struggles for gender rights, with women proving themselves capable in roles previously considered male-dominated, such as engineers, politicians, scientists. And additionally, professions like teaching and caregiving, once dominated by men, have transitioned to being predominantly female, reflecting changing societal attitudes towards gender roles. So gender roles are not something fixed or natural. They are very, very dependent on society. And there are many, let's say, fun examples. I said already that in the past, patient care, today patient care is provided by nurses, and now it's common for women to perform these jobs. But in the past, when this profession was established, it was carried by men. And there are some examples in ancient Rome, in India, in other countries as well. But also, did you know, for example, that high-heeled shoes were first worn by men? They were invented in the 15th century Persia and brought to Europe by traders, and aristocracy immediately loved them because men appeared taller in them. But after a while, women also started wearing them, and they went out of the fashion among the male population. And you might recall from movies, at least, that men also wore makeup and wigs in the courts of Europe. So there are many different examples how these gender traits are socially constructed and not something natural. And also there are some field-specific good examples that we found. For example, during the Second World War, the massive mobilization of men led to significant labor shortage. And as a response, women stepped into roles traditionally considered male only, taking on tasks like welding, metalwork in factories and other very heavy jobs. And this not only proved women's capabilities in these fields, but also led to their sustained presence in the workforce after the war. And as example, for you can see here in the picture, Eugenia Powell-Dees and Gladys Theus were recognized for their exceptional speed and skill in shipyards, welding during this time, during the Second War in the United States, for example. So they are very good examples of field related. But what also can teachers do? For example, during the regular classes, one class could be dedicated for gender roles. And to effectively explore gender topic, teachers might begin with an introduction and brief definition. What is gender, what are gender roles, gender inequalities and stereotypes to the students. And this could be followed by group discussion where students recognize places and instances of gender inequalities or even discrimination in society in general, but also in their school environment. Then they can divide, for example, students into small groups for their discussions where they could address questions like where they observe gender inequalities and stereotypes, so they can share their experiences and insights. And after that, each group might present their thoughts, leading to class debate that critically evaluate these practices. And of course, highlighting positive examples where women have succeeded in traditionally male-dominated fields or men in historically female-dominated roles, particularly those in areas of their study, like agriculture or other fields where they feel comfortable. What's also important to note that gender stereotypes are not just about the opposite gender. They also create biases about one's own gender. For example, for boys, those who do not meet traditional ideas of masculinity, such as, for example, being athletic, strong, ambitious, analytical, may face ridicule, social exclusion, even bullying from their peers, from their male peers, but also from their female peers. But also girls who aren't seen as feminine enough in terms of appearance or style can experience discrimination and isolation as well. And this non-conformity with societal standard could lead to discrimination and peer violence at the end for some people. And that's why it's crucial that we challenge these stereotypes and embrace diverse expression of personality and identity among students and among young people. And of course, teachers play a crucial role in this process because they can guide students by promoting universal values such as honesty, knowledge, empathy, and they can help them develop social skills. And I think that this is really important, especially in our societies where I can say that ambition and success and a lot of money are very prominent values and among young people as well. So giving other values and other role models are in that way really important. And at the end, how teachers can in everyday practice include in other activities, how they can tackle this issue of gender disparities, but also in more general way, social inequalities. Idea is to create inclusive environment in the classroom, because inclusive student participation is very important for creating an equitable and dynamic learning environment during whole period of study. And this could be done by ensuring that all students have equal opportunity to respond to questions, regardless of their gender, to grades or social background, because it helps foster a sense of belonging, self-esteem, self-respect, and also encourage diverse perspectives in the classroom. It's also important to avoid biases such as favoring extrovert students, girls or boys, or those, for example, from families with parents with tertiary education, from more educated families, because this can unintentionally or maybe intentionally marginalize others. Also, implementing inclusive practices like random selection methods while with who will answer can help involve everyone fairly. In practical lessons or during their practice engagement, including both boys and girls in all activities, promotes equality, breaks down the stereotypes as we already seen. And it's also important to note that privileging certain students exclude other students, and by ensuring that all students participate in all important tasks, we prevent any form of favoritism. And of course, I said that extroverts could dominate class, encouraging silent or less active students, both boys and girls, is really important, and this could be done by gently prompting them and praising aspects of their responses that they can build their confidence and uphold their dignity.
Sorry, Dragan, I just have to alert you about the time.
Yes, this is my last slide.
Okay.
And thank you very much for listening, and I hope that you will have some questions, comments, or insights related to our content created. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks to you for sharing all these interesting recommendations. When I was listening to you, I was thinking, okay, I hope that our teachers are getting this and are thinking about their next classes. But also, I think it's really applicable in a work context, because we have a lot of enterprise here with us today, and it can really be, I can imagine a situation where at the meeting you see extroverts, people dominate the discussion, and we can talk about inclusiveness in both spheres. And it seemed to me like a hand and egg problem. What comes first? First, do we have to see a person occupying a certain position to make sure that there is a vet enrollment, or we first need to have a vet enrollment in order to have employees in certain industry equally representing both the genders? So I'm curious to hear what Sarah and you think about that.
I guess that Sarah could.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I thought it was a wonderful presentation. Thank you, Dragan. It was really informative, really great, and I thought that it emphasised some of the points in the global data as well. Can I just address a question that somebody has placed, Sven, in the chat, who's asking for potential kind of guidance on what your gender targets can look like. I think that's like the heart of the question. And I think if you get a chance to watch the video, please do. It's a really good way to spend 5 minutes of your time. And the reason I chose this video is because often in the vet sector, what dominates the vet sector is labour-led changes. It can be really hard to make a sociological argument in the vet sector. But what's great about this video is that it starts with a labour market change and a skills shortage, and then it digs in to some of what Dragan has just raised. So this is why I like this video, because I often feel the vet sector is under pressure that everything has to be justified according to labour market need, and that this case study shows that well. There are many other rationales for having gender targets. I just realised that normally the vet sector is more constrained about which targets it can choose. So I realise that doesn't quite answer your question, but do, if you get a moment, look at the video, because it's a good example for the vet sector.
Good. So we have some follow-up tasks and to end thinking and reflecting on this issue at the moment when we stop. We do have another question. It's a bit critical. It says that in your presentation on gender disparities, there seems to be an emphasis on external influences. Masha, you move it now. Oh, okay, here it is. As the primary factors guiding girls' and women's educational and career choices. But this framing might suggest that yeah, they don't have a say there. What about those who actively decide against that? Do we have any research data about women who actively decide not to pursue vet? And it also, I don't know if the person who asked this had on his or her mind the question about early intervention that you also mentioned. And whether you see these two questions related. Sarah, Dragan?
Yeah. Well, I can try to give just brief answer to that. Yes, we can say that these are individual choices for any person about their career. But these choices are not neutral. They are part of social expectations and opportunities within their immediate environment. So if there are some, if there are strong, for example, patriarchal values in society, we can expect, for example, that women will be less willing to pursue higher education, for example, in some countries, and or that they will try to pursue career in those traditionally connected in those fields traditionally connected with female roles, for example, in caring activities. So, and for boys as well. So these are not neutral decisions. They are shaped during from the early socialization for most of us, basically, and this starts, you know, from the age 0, and many sociological research reflect on this, how women and girls are actually socialized to become mothers, sisters, to care about others, with different patterns of socialization in many cultures compared to boys. So these are not neutral decisions.
Yeah, it's difficult to see a person isolated, you know, like without external influences, but also we don't want to negate like interests and every other aspects that drive career choices. Even if you wanted to add on that, right?
Yeah, I just want to add on the data bit is that PISA results are the sound basis for comparing vet education and general education. And OECD have been publishing for a while now very good comparisons between the kids who are in vet education and general education. And we have linked in our study, and we have sent links, and it will be part of my presentation. We have sent links on the studies that include that data, and you have links on the OECD publications that refer to that. It's very, very interesting material, and it shows how those choices, what just Dragan said, are predetermined in a way, and also can be influenced by maybe affecting the way we approach education and the selection and enrollment of pupils. That includes networks of schools, that includes how we promote VET, that includes how we approach to employability of graduates, etc. So OECD PISA results, very interesting.
Good. Thanks for this remark. Sarah, would you like to add anything on this?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. And also from the labour market perspective, anyone that's seen the movie Hidden Figures will know that human computers and coders were originally women, and they are now completely dropped out of that skill. So it doesn't make any sense. That labour market change over time doesn't make any sense. And also from an educational perspective, we don't always do a good job, I would say, of differentiating equity with equality. Again, I'm going to go back to this case study. One of the things that comes out of the case study is that they realise women self-define themselves earlier than boys. Girls self-define at an earlier age. So if you don't catch that girl at 11 or 12, when she thinks she can do anything that a boy can do, she will start to redefine herself. Boys may define themselves later, which is why they're not going into tertiary level education. So this isn't, as I said at the beginning, this isn't a zero-sum game. Knowing more about this helps both genders. It helps all of us, right?
I couldn't think of any better way to round up the discussion than what you've just said. And since we're running out of time, I would encourage you all to reflect and to think about this. Let's remember that each step toward gender equality in our classrooms or training centers or offices, it's paving the way for a future where more girls or more boys are free to choose their own career path and contribute to innovation and fairness and more opportunities. Thank you all. Thanks first to our dear panelists and speakers, to your participation and engagement. Thanks to participants who asked thoughtful questions. We hope you found this discussion insightful and motivating. Remember to check on your inbox for follow-up materials after today's session. And before we close, I would like to give a word to our team leader, Frida Woman, to close the session. Frida, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Elena. Yeah. First, apologies. I was only able to follow the second half of the webinar, but heard very interesting inputs and ideas here. From our side as well, from the management team, I think you said already thank you to especially the panelists, very thought-provoking, and as well to the many participants for Friday afternoon. Chapeau, and thank you very much for joining us here. And we will take some of the ideas definitely to the RCF and see how that might be included in the calls one way or the other. So I'm not going to make it too sharp now. But maybe there's something in as well for future calls. Thanks a lot to everybody, and have a good afternoon and a nice weekend.
Yes, thanks. Nice weekend from my side too. Relaxing weekend, but not too relaxing to stop reflecting on gender issues in your community and organization. Thanks a lot, and talk to you soon again.
Bye bye. Thank you.